Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching. Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome back to Extraordinary Connection. My name is Brian Steele, and I have the privilege of being the pastor at Grace UMC in Chesterfield, Michigan. And I am grateful and excited to be with you today. So, 2 weeks ago, on my last devotion, I started this little series about what a church member is. The vows that we take when we become a member in any United Methodist Church, wherever you are. And the first vow I talked about is prayer. And admitted that even though I have a complicated relationship with prayer, it's a really important discipline and practice for us to do as a faith community. But prayer is usually more of an isolated practice, something we do on our own. Maybe it's in a small group. Today I kind of like to go to the other end of the spectrum and talk about what we do communally, what we do all together. I'd like to talk to you about the vow of presence. Now, presence is an incredibly interesting topic to think about in our current situation. Coming out of a pandemic, and when we are in the middle of a pandemic, what does presence mean? And if I was talking to someone who wanted to join our church 2 years ago, I was telling them about presence, I would talk about how it's really matters for us to be physically together. That their participation in worship and being an active physical participant in our community holds value. That was 2 years ago. Now in 2021, amidst the pandemic, which is still here, and especially with this new Delta variant, that definition of presence has expanded, at least for the time being. And now you may be vaccinated and you may be comfortable going to in-person services, and that's great. That type of presence still really matters. But I think what we've learned in the past 18 months is that presence is more than just physical now. God has revealed to us that being present with each other goes beyond just showing up in the same building. Rather, I think presence is a willingness to stay connected and in relationship with whatever means we have. And as we see right now, that includes being present digitally. Presence is a willingness to continue to engage relationally. Now, if we get this pandemic behind us, I think God's preference is for us to be physically present together. That is still the most impactful form of worship where God really does something special among us. But even post-pandemic, whenever that happens, there may be times where, for whatever reason, whether someone's sick or whether people have a lot of kids or someone's shut in, whatever, people may not be able to be physically together. But even when we aren't physically present, we can still practice presence. We can still stay connected to our church. Now, most of our churches have ways where if you're worshiping online, you can check in or at least talk with others. Let people know you're here. Because presence, again, is not just this physical going around shaking hands and going back and sitting down, but a conscious decision to stay faithful to a community of faith that, at least at one time, poured into your life and made you want to make a commitment to them. This is continuing to worship with a group of people in different ways, even as perhaps the bigger church down the street might have a lot of glitz and glamour. Presence in these past 18 months have mattered, even though it was probably not your preference for how we met. Because presence isn't about having our preferences met. Presence is about trusting that God is still at work, even if we perhaps disagree with some of the protocols in place. Taking part in worship, whether it's digitally or in person, matters. One of my favorite classes during my seminary years was called The Ethics of Community. It was taught by Dr. Christine Pohl, who wrote the book Living into Community, which is a great read if you're looking for something to read at your church together. It's essentially about what type of disciplines, what practices do we have to do that help sustain us as a community of faith during hard times. And one of the core values she talks about is faithfulness, promise keeping, staying committed to each other during hard times. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that there are not legitimate reasons to sometimes leave a church, because there are. Sometimes for a variety of reasons. I've even been there myself, where a season in one place has to end and I need to move on. But during a time that we're in now, I think we need to remember that we need to be offering an abundance of grace to each other. That we are called to each other and not away from each other. And we do that through presence, digitally or in person. By recognizing that God is still at work, even when technology doesn't work, or even when it's not up to our standards, or it's not convenient for us, or even when that church down the street is doing a whole lot better job. Presence still matters. So however you practice it right now, on your living room couch, drinking coffee, or in person with your Sunday best, however you practice presence, practice it. Presence has taken on an expanded meaning in this time. And God is still speaking. So friends, show up. However you do, be present with your community of faith, and I can assure you that Jesus will still come near us all. Amen, and we'll see you next time on Extraordinary Connection.